Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I am Adam Pawadic, sitting here with Aaron Cameron at the Edmonton Real Estate Forum. This is part of our speaker video series, and of course, I want to thank our sponsor for that, Qualico Properties. Our guest today is probably somebody that you might have heard of. We have the honor of speaking with John Baird, Senior Advisor Bennett Jones, known, of course, for his political career that preceded Bennett Jones. But John, welcome.
Great to be with you.
Aaron and I, unfortunately, were podcasting during your session this morning, but you covered geopolitical risk. And so we are going to revisit that, of course, for the many listeners that are not attending the forum today. We're going to talk about housing at a national level. You're obviously very well equipped to speak on both. But before we get into any of that, can you give a little bit of the background on your career, how you got into where you are today?
Great. Well, I spent 10 years in Ontario politics and 10 years in the government of Canada. I had 10 different cabinet posts over those years. Ended up as a foreign minister. I retired about 9 years ago. Now I'm at Bennett Jones in our Toronto office, but work with partners and clients across the country. I also do a bunch of other corporate advisory work for Baird, for the Eurasia Group, the world's largest geopolitical risk consultancy. I'm chairman of Canfor, Canadian Forest Products, and on the board of Canadian Pacific. So I do a whole bunch of things to keep my day busy.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Why politics?
I guess I was interested in politics when I was young. I had a teacher that ran, actually wasn't successful, and that first got my interest. And then when I left university, that's what I decided to pursue. I think too many people stay too long, so you got to have some. I don't believe in term limits necessarily, but there's got to be some sort of restraint. So after 10 years in Ontario politics, I sort of blew up my life, resigned, and then went federal. And then after 10 years in federal politics, did the same and went into the private sector.
And you're happy you're out.
I don't have to fight with as many people.
I'm curious what you think about this, because I actually ran for MP for the Green Party in 2008, a long time ago, and I always had interest in politics too. And as I've gotten older and maybe called more mature, I have no interest in getting in politics, and there's lots of reasons for that. But it seems to be a very challenging opportunity, but it also seems to attract people that don't necessarily have the best interest in mind of Canadians. Like, it doesn't seem to be this altruistic. At least, you think about back in the 40s, you ask kids, what do you want to be? Politician was one of the policemen, politician. That doesn't happen anymore. Do you have a comment on that? Like, how does that work? How does that go?
When I first ran, there was no internet. I didn't even have a cell phone in my first campaign, or a computer. And then when I left, you had the full throttle of social media. So it's become a lot more competitive, a lot tougher. It's a bare knuckle game. I think that's both good and bad. But there's a lot of the bad part. It can be increasingly nasty, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But it is what it is. And people have strong views. There are different values that they want to push.
So events like this are a softer crowd than the bare knuckle politicians of today.
Well, you just spend so much time fighting. When you're a minister, you're fighting with your department, you're fighting with the prime minister's office, you're fighting with the opposition, the media, your stakeholders. So it's
draining.
It's really draining. And I didn't really recognize how much time I did spend fighting until I left. Now, you think more in the long term rather than in the next, rather than the very short term, and you give your best advice and counsel, and it's up to people.
What do you miss about it?
You miss the team sport, and you miss the action. Absolutely.
The big wins and the
yes.
I'm sure you don't miss the media attention.
No, I do. Most politicians really don't like question period. I really thrived in that sort of environment. So you miss the action at times, and there's a bit of theater. I always thought you can be really tough and be really aggressive, but you don't take it personally against you, and others shouldn't take it. I could be pretty aggressive with someone on the floor of the House of Commons, and then afterwards go for a beer.
And those are the clips that make the internet now, of course, the 30-second, cheap shots that we're taking each other.
I think people didn't, for a while, they thought I went around poking, screaming and yelling and poking my finger in people's faces, and they found out that I'm not like that in real.
So now you're spending your time consultancy. Let's just talk about the geopolitical issues that you're facing. Well, sorry, no, let's go the other way. Let's talk about the Canadian economy first, then go to geopolitical. So what kind of things are you seeing in the Canadian economy, and how is that impacting the advice that you're giving to your clients?
I think we're in real trouble. Our productivity is way down. The innovation is way down. Our economic growth is way down. The debt has skyrocketed, doubled in just 2 years, and we have nothing to show for it other than debt. When you take the federal and the provincial debt, we're in the worst shape we've been in since the Second World War. We had competent macroeconomic policy under Brian Mulroney, Jean Chrétien, and Stephen Harper, but we seem to have returned to the exact opposite of that, and it's left us in bad shape.
Can you explain the productivity decline?
We just don't seem to we seem to go out of our way to actively discourage investment, to actively discourage risk taking, to actively discourage entrepreneurialism. The harder people work, the more they make, the more the government comes after them, and it's just not logical. For example, when this government first took office back in 2015, the first thing they did, and Parliament was sitting literally for 12 minutes, and they raised the top marginal rate to in Ontario to 53.55%. They actually brought in $4 billion less money. So not only is it bad macroeconomic policy, it also left a huge fiscal gap. And the entrepreneur, the successful business person, if you're a really accomplished surgeon, you can go to the United States, you can go to the United Kingdom or Switzerland, but the average auto worker or the average teacher can't. And what's resulted in is that the middle class is bearing a bigger burden of the debt load.
What about the more recent capital gains tax as a bit of an attack on entrepreneurs?
Well, it's a huge tax, huge attack on people who take risks, and it's almost a eat the rich mentality. And when you beat up people that are successful, and people often think of, oh, that's a billionaire sitting in an ivory tower. What that may be is that accomplished cardiac surgeon who's chosen to make Canada his home or her home instead of London, England, or instead of the United States, where they could make a lot more money. When that family goes to sell the family cottage that Grandpa bought 50 years ago, they're gonna be whacked. And it's not like this money is going to into anything productive. It just seemed to be going down the drain in wasteful government spending in Ottawa.
Is the current government getting anything right on the housing file? Some of the more recent incentives for housing?
Well, there's no doubt the current government, their fingerprints over the problem are there. You look at what housing rates were when Pierre Poilievre was the housing minister versus what they are today. It's obviously demonstrably worse, and that's chiefly because they printed so much money and caused inflation and interest rates to skyrocket. I can remember when I first bought a condominium. When I was 24 years old, my mother was in real estate, and she said, "You will never see interest rates this low." And my mortgage was like 6.7%. And I even, when advising Pierre Poilievre, I even had to say to him, would that 30-year-old articling student or young lawyer, or that young teacher, would they even know what inflation was? Because it just hasn't been something that's really existed in their adult lifetime. And so the interest rates and the skyrocketing spending have caused inflation. That's put housing out of the reach of so many people. And I think the worst thing we're seeing isn't that people say, my kids aren't going to have as good a life as I had. I don't have a good life as I had 25 years ago. And that's why we need to really shake things up. I think this new housing minister seems to be one of the more impressive people, which is not a great accomplishment in this government. But tinkering won't be enough. You really need to fundamentally transform the way the approvals happen. Taking 5, 6, 7 years to get projects approved are ridiculous, and we need to think transformationally. I'll give you an example. When I did this, I was infrastructure minister. When we did the infrastructure stimulus during the global economic crisis in 08 to 10, we got 23,500 projects. We just cut red tape. We exempted federal environmental assessments from most projects. We just one-page application for them. We got 23,500 projects done in 30 months. Some of the changes were so effective. We required one project, one environmental assessment, not two. And it was so successful, we tried to make it permanent. And the NDP leader got up and said, "You've destroyed the environment for the last 2 years. Now you're going to make it permanent." And I said, "Well, the 23,500 projects, can you name me one where there was a problem?" "That's not the point, Minister." "Well, it is the point." The next day they found one. And would you believe it? It was from the regular infrastructure program. It had two full individual environmental assessments, federally and provincially. So of 23,500 projects, there was no problem. And we've just got to get government out of the way, get the gatekeepers from nitpicking, and slowing down projects so that good things can happen. We have all these rules in place to stop bad things from happening, but no rules in place to help good things happen.
Traditionally, housing's been a sort of municipal and provincial challenge. I mean, and maybe just help explain, because I don't understand it. Quickly, in the last sort of 18 months, housing's now become a federal issue. has the federal government always had sort of ownership over it and just been kind of been hands off out of request of the province and the municipalities, or is it really now their hands are being forced because of ineptitude at the municipal and provincial levels?
It's been by and large a provincial and municipal issue, and I think obviously the current government is trying to shake that up and is getting into fights with some of the provinces. In Ontario, they're going right around the provincial government, right to municipalities. But I think what the official opposition is talking about is that they're going to use the federal spending power. I mean, healthcare is a provincial issue, but the Canada Health Act used the federal transfer for health to require certain things, and I think that's what the next government will do, is use that federal spending power to get results. And listen, if Toronto can't get those housing approvals going, Mississauga next door they will, and there'll be a carrot and stick approach. At least that's what I would recommend to make things happen.
Well, you mentioned the delay, and we've been here now in Edmonton for 2 days, and particularly in Edmonton and Calgary, the ability to buy land and build units rapidly is cutting edge or industry leading across the country. How do you incent at a federal level? How do you incent a municipality to cut down on that red tape? Like, is there a way to do that? You can't really come in and just say you must make things.
The Edmonton model.
I disagree. You can't. I introduced work for welfare in Ontario, and municipalities, the province sets the rules, but municipalities deliver. And we put work for welfare quotas in the numbers. They had to establish so many work for welfare placements, and for every placement you were short, we'd fine you $1,000, and for every placement that you succeeded, we'd give you $1,000 reward. And it's amazing, all the municipalities finally got on board and delivered, and some of them walked away with some pretty big paychecks that they were able to use for social services. So I think you really need to step up and say this has got to be a national priority. And listen, if when we were dealing with infrastructure during the stimulus, if municipality A couldn't get things moving quickly, we'll just give the money to municipality B, and that forced everyone to work a little harder and to sharpen their pencils and to be more aggressive.
Humans are nothing if not incentive aligned. It's you can definitely make the results you want through that. Is there anything that you're excited about in Canada over the next 5 years that would have a positive impact on some of the the visions you have in this country?
I just think we can return, the next government federally can return to competent macroeconomic policy, competent fiscal policy, tackling some of the big challenges that we're facing economically. I think the future looks a lot brighter than the last 9 years.
But the medicine's going to be a little bitter, I think, in order to get us to that. That end result.
The policies coming out of Ottawa have certainly been pretty bitter for most Canadians. Who have just had to have their 30-year-old son living in the basement, or a family of two working, making $180,000, find it difficult to get a deposit for their down payment for their home. So it couldn't certainly it may be medicine, but it couldn't be much worse in the last 9 years.
Yeah, no, agreed. Maybe we'll talk about Canada in an international context. Attracting investment dollars to Canada is a key part of our growth. And my understanding is we're becoming less competitive at an international level over the last however many years. You have a view at that kind of level. How are people viewing Canada externally, looking at us?
Well, you look at the amount of foreign capital which has fled Canada, particularly in Alberta, over the last 10 years. It's really incredible. We send a message that we can't get any big projects done. I mean, the notable exception is the Trans Mountain Pipeline here in Alberta. But we've seen a lot of foreign capital flee, and we got to change course and send a different message out, and stop picking fights with every major country in the world. We picked a fight with Saudi Arabia, with China, with India. I saw the former Prime Minister from Australia who was running down our government, and it takes a lot of work to screw up the Canada-Australia relationship. So hopefully we can change course and to send a message that this is a good place to invest. I mean, but you look at the environment in Alberta, how different it is 10 years ago than it was 10 years ago. You saw the real estate market in Calgary. The forecasts for Edmonton are phenomenal. Just the Trans Mountain opening up, for every dollar, it's up about the differential is down $5, and that's $250 million benefit to the Alberta Treasury every dollar. You look at there's a lot of optimism. One of the jobs I do in the forest product sector, we just bought 3 mills in northwestern British Columbia. This is a place where people want to invest. So and the government seems to be in a race with Saskatchewan to be the most competent government in the country. So good on Alberta.
Capital flows going one way, human capital flows going the other way. I mean, with 1 million people joining, I think ultimately Canadians see it as a net positive. I mean, certainly from the real estate community, those are our customers. They're obviously the user of our product, and so that ultimately helps demand and helps returns. How do you see it? Just the incredible growth we've had of our
immigration
of our
is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a great success. It's what's building this country. But there has to be some constraints. We need to be looking at how many we can absorb with housing, with schools, and into the economy. And it's not so much a Canadian problem. It's just that when immigrants come to Canada, they want to go to the Greater Toronto area. They want to go to Vancouver, Calgary, even Edmonton. If you look at the face of Edmonton, it's changed so much. Not so much demand outside of Montreal and Quebec. Not as much demand in the Maritimes or on certain parts of the prairies. So it's hard for these few centers to absorb it all. And we've got to be looking at who we bring in. Like we need to be bringing in construction trades immigrants. We need to be bringing in tool makers, die makers, people with specific skills that the economy needs to help fuel the growth.
On the credit market side, geopolitical risk at a global scale, the black swan events that we can't control. Where do you see risk globally that we literally have no impact over, but can impact our bond markets, which of course it impacts our real estate market in a significant way?
Well, and it can have different effects in different parts of Canada. You look at the tinderbox, which is the Middle East. 10% of the world's trade goes through the Red Sea, and that's under attack through the Houthis in Yemen. Backed and funded and armed by Iran. You look at Iran's attack on Israel, Israel's response. You look at the war in Gaza. It's the whole Middle East is a tinderbox, and that could have a huge effect on energy markets. And if you look back to the years before World War I, and even on the days before World War I, no one really wanted a war. Just a bunch of events, all came together that led to one. You look at the situation in Ukraine, where you have one leader in Russia who thinks they can change the borders of Europe in this century. I mean, that we thought we had seen the end of that with the end of the Second World War, but it's back again, and the potential of that spiraling out of control is real. One bad decision to go into a NATO country could be devastating to the global economy. Even if Putin gets backed into a corner, the potential that he might even use a tactical nuclear strike, something more on the scale of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, is not out of the question. There's no check on Putin's power. There's no Politburo that could take him out, and Khrushchev was actually taken out by the Politburo in the 1960s, and we just simply don't have. There's no check on his power for the decisions that he makes, and that's incredibly bad. For a year with China and the United States, there was no military to military high level contact that could try to deal with what you call a mistake or misinterpretation of an action. That Biden is trying to put that under control. The United States is sending a lot of high-level folks to re-engage with China to try to calm things down, to cool the temperature down. And Canada's just missing in action. We have no high-level folks engaging with China. And China's the second largest economy, largest population country in the world. Ignoring them isn't, and watching a new Cold War develop is not in the best interest of global peace and security.
I mean, this sounds a bit sadistic, so please don't judge me. But isn't sort of a geopolitical disruption and a lot of these things that you're discussing, at the current levels or even at heightened levels, don't they ultimately end up benefiting Canada as a sort of a geopolitical or safe haven, very comfortable here, sort of isolated by two oceans, the largest military immediately to our south. Like there's a safety net that Canada holds as a result. So if the more disruption and disarray that's occurring around the globe, doesn't that mean more money coming into Canada and more people coming into Canada?
We can't give ourselves any false sense of security. We have an American elections happening in November. When Donald Trump renegotiated NAFTA, he put a 5-year review clause in, and that 5-year review clause happens next month. So that is a huge cloud over the Canadian economy.
Like open up to renegotiation?
Well, it's subject to renegotiation, subject to being opened up. Now, I think we were relatively competent in the way we tackled the Trump challenge in 2016, 17. But despite the good relationship between our prime minister and the U.S. president, we've got virtually nothing accomplished in those last 3 years. So that's a huge problem where a geopolitical threat could affect Canada. Positive, I suppose, if oil spikes, it'll be good for Western Canada, but bad for Central Canada.
I'm not going to ask your view on the upcoming election, in detail, but our relationship with the U.S. in general over the last few presidencies, obviously critical to our success. Do you see? I know Canada's been trying to move away from that more recently with other opportunities and relationships. What is your view on our reliance on the U.S. or should we be pursuing that as
we've always put too many eggs in the U.S. Basket, and that's a real problem. But it's not like as the relationship has declined with the United States, it's not like we've improved it anywhere else. I was one of the few that back in 2016 predicted 12 days out that Trump would win. If an election were held today, he would be elected.
In jail or not in jail, probably.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin are neck and neck, tied. Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, even Nevada, which Trump lost both times, are now in the Trump call. Now, there's no election today, but I think there's certainly a minimum 65% chance that Trump could be reelected. And people say, well, what if Trump got convicted of one of these criminal offenses? He's facing 93 of them.
Makes him a martyr, doesn't it?
What happens? Well, how about this? What if he gets off on the first one? His attorneys just about got the charges stayed in New York because of prosecution errors. Even the judge acknowledged that there was a reasonable case to declare a mistrial. This morning, Trump was granted an appeal in the Atlanta case with Fani Willis. The judge indefinitely postponed his trial in Miami on the documents charge. So the trial we're currently seeing in New York, it could be the only one that voters have a look at before Election Day. And no one has ever been convicted for the type of charges that Trump is facing in New York. I'm not defending it. I'm just John Edwards, the former vice presidential candidate with the Democratic Party, faced similar charges, and he got a hung jury. So no one's ever been convicted of this. So it's actually we should be thinking the opposite. What if he does get off on this? It could help fuel him and propel him into the White House again.
As a former politician, just seeing how Trump's persuaded the electorate to get the support and to have almost the unwavering group of people that support him. Does it make you uncomfortable at all?
I've never seen anything like this in my life. We have a much more accountable political system in Canada. As a cabinet minister, if I even became, let alone being indicted, if I ever was under investigation, you have to step down. It's like it's not a law, but it's a political practice. The type of outrageous things that both candidates have said would almost disqualify you from office here. So it looks to me like the United States almost views the presidential election. Too many people in the United States view the presidential election as a reality TV show. And I don't think that's what the founding fathers had in mind.
Is it not weird that seems to be this void of accountability to it? I don't know how can you explain that?
Well, the entertainment factor is through the roof. I will give you that.
Yeah. It is. I mean, on both sides, it's quite extraordinary.
Okay, back to Canada. We're almost out of time. I got one last question. Is that
sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Next leadership group, whoever that may be, what should be their 3 top objectives be in Canada?
I think affordability and housing. That will be the number one priority, certainly of the next government, if it's not this one. I think returning competent macroeconomic policy and tackling crime, which is spiked all over the country.
Is that crime related to sort of the challenges we're having with
poverty and
drugs?
You see the effect of the legalization of illicit narcotics,
which they're now rolling back
in
on
Vancouver, which even the NDP is backing on. They're trying to bring it to Toronto, and the federal government won't rule it out. You see in Toronto last year there was 12,000 cars stolen in Toronto. 12,000. Like, I know 3 people who've had their
Yeah,
front door
mine was stolen.
had their
And
front their front door kicked in the middle of the night, hoping to find the car keys on the front table. And in one of those cases, they went upstairs to get the keys from the occupant of the home. So this is a huge problem.
Well, thank you very much, John. Appreciate you taking the time. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd like to thank First National for powering the podcast. I'd like to thank Qualico Properties for sponsoring the speaker video series here at the Edmonton Real Estate Forum. And John, thanks again for coming on.
Great to be with you, folks.